naturally, there was a greater diversion to the electronics and the IT industry. And when the car production bounced back stronger than expected after the first wave in 2020, there was a shortage of chips for the auto sector. Now, what made matters worse were a string of disasters. Fukushima earthquake leading to closure of Japan's Renesas semiconductor plant in February, fire in the Renesas plant in March, Texas snowstorm leading to closure of semiconductor manufacturing units in Austin, and closure of semiconductor foundries in Malaysia and Thailand due to COVID-related lockdowns. All of this led to the worst festive season for auto dealers in a decade. Shortage of chips meant that industry could not produce as per demand. In fact, according to Federation of Automobile Dealers, this 42-day festive season was the worst they had in a decade. And they lost about 2.4 lakh units in retail sales because cars were just not available in the market. Companies were forced to make big production cuts. In fact, Maruti Suzuki, India's largest car maker, had to slash production by 60% in September. There has been some recovery, and production shortfall for Maruti is now about 10 to 15%. The company says pandemic-related uncertainties will continue. Tata Motors said it had to face a production loss of about 60,000 units due to COVID-19 and semiconductor crisis, and would have lost close to 1 lakh units in sales volumes due to the chip shortage. The company believes the semiconductor production is extremely uncertain, with no firm outlook by key suppliers. Finally, is a recovery in sight? So Bosch, which has set up task forces to deal with the chip shortage, says the situation cannot be expected to improve anytime soon. And the global auto sector will be confronted with the chip shortage for months to come. Another major manufacturer of ECUs, Continental, has said that semiconductor crisis will continue throughout 2022 and beyond. Lead times for semiconductor chips is likely to be at least 6 months, and the company is now planning component demand for 24 months and 5 years for strategic components. So clearly, the semiconductor crisis is something that we'll have to live with in 2022 as well.
Well, that was the story as far as the semiconductor shortage is concerned. Now, 2021 also saw the largest congregation of countries to tackle climate change. 190 countries were in Glasgow for the COP26 climate summit. We saw some progress with major agreements being signed to cutting greenhouse gases and ending deforestation. But there were some compromises, and many climate experts believe a lot more needs to be done. Anshu Sharma is here with the COP26 report card.
COP26, or Conference of the Parties under the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, was the most significant meet since the 2015 Paris Agreement. The meet was held in Glasgow under the co-presidency of United Kingdom and Italy, and over 190 members of the convention met to decide on concerted action on climate change. The 2015 Paris Agreement was crucial as countries agreed to keep global warming well below 2 degrees and try to aim for 1.5 degrees. Another important decision back then was to set a goal to keep cutting emissions to reach net zero by 2050. In Glasgow this year, the key issues discussed included climate change mitigation, reduction in greenhouse gases emission globally, climate financing for developing countries, phasing out of coal, among many other issues. The key agreements included United States and China, the biggest carbon dioxide emitters, pledging to cooperate more over the next decade. The other controversial issue was on phasing down of coal rather than phasing out, and for the first time there was no explicit plan to reduce use of coal. The late intervention by both China and India in phasing down coal use means that there is no particular timeline now to end coal use, even as coal is responsible for 40% of annual carbon dioxide emission. Apart from this, more than 100 countries promised to stop deforestation by 2030, cut methane emissions by 30% by the year 2030. Over 80 countries endorsed One Sun, One World, One Grid declaration, and financial organizations with over $130 trillion in assets under management agreed to back clean technologies. India specifically committed to achieve zero emission by 2070, 50% energy sourcing from renewable sources, and renewable capacity of 500 gigawatt by 2030. Not just that, it has also decided to cut in emissions intensity by 33 to 35% of GDP from 2005 levels by 2030. In terms of action, India has already achieved 24% reduction in emission intensity, 40% of power generation comes from non-fossil fuel sources, and has announced green hydrogen mission to cut on methane emission. So while COP26 saw many long-term climate commitments, the fact remains that even after factoring in the full implementation of these and the 2030 commitments, the global average temperature is expected to rise by 1.8 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial era under the most optimistic scenario. And experts suggest that the most likely outcome is the increase of 2.4 degrees Celsius. What this implies is the need for more ambitious actions and execution to face the climate challenge.
Well, the climate clock is ticking. It's time for us to head into a break. But when we return, a look back at how the RBI cracked the whip on defaulters and the top 5 verdicts from the Supreme Court in 2021.